Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Why Wasn't It Better podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Darms,
And I'm your co-host, Anton Paras.
and we have a return guest making his second appearance, Brian Anderson. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be back for better or worse. We'll see how this second time around goes, but glad to be here.
Glad to have you. I mean, last time you were on the show, we talked about some Willy Wonka. So what do you think? It's only up from there?
I do, yeah. I think Willy Wonka is a very strong opinion, or I held a very strong opinion on Willy Wonka. I'm excited to talk about something that has a little more range than one far end of the spectrum. But yeah, I'm excited to jump into it.
It'll be fun. I mean, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I've seen a lot worse.
True that, brother.
Have you seen worse Johnny Depp movies or Tim Burton movies?
I've seen worse Johnny Depp movies.
Yeah, I probably liked Alice in Wonderland less than Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
That's fair. That's tough. That's fair. I think they're about the same vein.
Yeah, but...
Curious, Anton, what's the worst Johnny Depp movie you've seen?
It was going to be the same thing. Or the sequel to it. I think the sequel is really not my cup of tea.
Yeah, that's fair.
I avoided it. I had a bad feeling.
It just feels really hollow.
You know what's a bad Johnny Depp movie? Did you ever see The Tourist?
Yes, with Angelina.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. He's probably in a lot of movies that are worse that we're not even thinking of earlier in his career that we didn't see.
Yeah. Think before Gilbert Grape.
Maybe, yeah.
I'm trying to think what he was even in now.
I mean, he did a lot of interesting, smaller roles before he turned into, a megastar with Pirates of the Caribbean. He was just the weirdo guy.
I mean, he did Ed Wood. That was a pretty subversive film.
Yeah, it was. We're not here to talk about Johnny Depp, though.
No, if listeners were like, wait, I thought we were talking about a totally different film.
Is this the right episode?
Yeah, it's quickly the shit on Johnny Depp.
Yeah. So we're here to talk about funny people, which is, I would imagine, a movie that most people don't remember, but we do. And that's why we're covering it. I remember my theater experience for this one. I'll get into that a little bit later, because I saw this in the theater. I don't know if both of you did.
I took a girl on a date to this movie.
I was that girl. No, I actually did see it in theaters too, which is a rare occurrence for me. I have not visited the cinema as much as I would like, but this is one that I did go see and was excited to see in the theater.
I think the excitement was real, which is why we're covering it. On paper, promised a lot.
So recently learning that he has a terminal illness, comic legend George Simmons spots a struggling performer named Ira and decides to become his mentor. The men become close friends as George teaches Ira the art of stand-up comedy, and Ira helps George define his legacy. When an old flame reappears and the disease goes into remission, George gets a chance to reevaluate his life and figure out what is truly important to him. Released on July 31st, 2009 by Universal Pictures, Columbia Pictures, Relativity Media, Apatow Productions, and Madison 23 Productions. Written and directed by Judd Apatow, starring Adam Sandler, Seth Rogen, Leslie Mann, Eric Bana, Jonah Hill, Jason Schwartzman, Aubrey Plaza, and the RZA. Budget $75 million, which is $110 million adjusted for inflation, with a box office of $71.6 million. So $105 million adjusted for inflation. Ouch. So we started to touch on it a little bit. Pat, why are we talking about funny people today?
It was released at the end of one of the most extraordinary, successful decades that a filmmaker has ever had. And I'm talking about Judd Apatow. He, along with a group of close collaborators, I would say defined that era of comedy. Him and I would say Adam McKay pretty much defined mainstream American comedy films in the 2000s. They revitalized the idea of the R-rated comedy. If you were to describe a film to someone as an Apatow film, especially if they're our age or older, chances are that they would know exactly what you're talking about. Relatable characters, a lot of improvised dialogue, crude humor, but real heart. There was real charm to these comedies. They took subjects like losing your virginity, like accidentally getting pregnant. They didn't invent this type of comedy, but they really redefined it. And very memorable ensemble casts, a lot of pop culture commentary. From 2003 to 2009, really the biggest comedies coming out of Hollywood were in some way associated with Judd Apatow. And the most notable collaborator of his ended up being Seth Rogen, who is, of course, in some ways the main character of this film, even though, I mean, Adam Sandler is billed first, but I would argue Seth Rogen plays the main character, Ira, right? Or you could say they're co-protagonists. The other thing about Apatow's films was most of them were pretty successful at the box office. Anchorman, 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, Superbad, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Talladega Nights. He was involved in all these films. He didn't direct all of them, but he was at least a co-producer or a co-writer on all of them. All of these are pretty much instant classics to all the films that I just mentioned. He also made an impact on television earlier in his career with a short-lived show called Freaks and Geeks, which only lasted for a season, but it proved to be quite influential down the line, considering who was in it.
Have you watched that show?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's a good show.
Paul
Yeah,
Rudd.
it is.
Like finding it after People's Rise, James Franco, Seth Rogen.
Definitely one of those things that was not appreciated at the time, hence why it was canceled.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Funny People. It was supposed to be the cherry on top of this decade. I remember the trailer for this, and rewatching it now to prepare for this episode. The trailer's great. It looks like an all-timer. And then, of course, the involvement of Adam Sandler, that's where a lot of the hype came from. You're like, well, wait, Adam Sandler's going to be in a Judd Apatow movie? One of the best comedic actors of ever in an Apatow movie? Like, how could this not be great? I don't know how you guys felt about it, but when I saw it in the theater, I was like borderline depressed by it. I was confused by it. It seems like a lot of people were. Was it a comedy? Was it a drama? Why was it so long? Nobody really liked it. Anton, you said the box office numbers. It totally bombed. Didn't even make its budget back. Critics didn't love it either. It has a 69% Rotten Tomatoes score. So, not terrible, but not amazing. And then before I turn things over to both of you, 15 years or 16 years later, its reputation does not really seem to have improved. Like any film that we cover, it has its fans, but you don't really hear anybody talking about Funny People in 2025.
Nope, it's not. It's not on any underrated lists.
Now, I'm sure there's people that'll tell you it's underrated, but it's borderline forgotten at this point. This is a film that I wanted to cover, Anton, since basically the start of the podcast. I always had this on my list because, like I said, on paper, I expected greatness from this.
I think I had a very similar experience as you, right? Going into it, having followed, or just that age, that era, been very into Judd Apatow movies, finding that new comedic style and Seth Rogen and characters that you just come to love and are excited to see in the next thing. And then, boom, Funny People. It's coming out. It's got Adam Sandler, to your point, big billing. And it just left you, I wouldn't say depressed, let down, though, for sure. Like, I went into this, and now I'm just confused as to what I'm watching, and I feel like it's a lot of missed opportunities and way too many minutes of my life spent being confused or robbed of what I thought I was getting. I will say, though, on rewatch, I feel better about the movie. I still do not think it is a great movie. I think the reason why you don't have many people out there advocating for it being a great movie or underrated is because it is just very, very mild, right? Like, there's not enough to really drive some divisiveness and hate, but there's not really enough to drive a true love or connection for it, like you've had with other movies, like Forgetting Sarah Marshall, one of my all-time favorite movies. Knocked Up, hilarious. Year-Old Virgin, probably like the first funniest movie that he came out that spun off all these things. So I think this one I think everybody kind of felt the same about it, right? Like, truly, to plug the name of the show, why wasn't it better? Because it should have been by all measure and all billing. And really just left like, well, guess it's over. Like, no strong feelings one way or the other towards it.
Yeah, this is a film that's very dated, and it's not just because of the MySpace reference, but it doesn't help. But there is a decent amount of things that I appreciate about the film that we'll talk about, of course. But it is absolutely true that this is a very forgotten film, and I think expectations, poor marketing, and I would dare to guess some hubris all adds to lack of execution on this film. But hey, we're talking real serious about a film called Funny People, but we're gonna have some fun on this episode, aren't we? Because
we are.
There's a lot to have fun about with this movie.
Yeah. Maybe I was a little hyperbolic when I said I was depressed when I came out of this movie. I think, Brian, what you said is probably more apt. Let down.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I thought I'd be laughing more.
I expected terminal cancer to be funnier.
Yeah, it's
That-
it was weird. I'll say that.
Well, I don't know if I wrote this down, so I want to say it now before I forget. All the funniest jokes are in the trailer.
And that's called poor marketing.
It is. We'll talk about that in a bit. The question we're going to try to answer, which, Brian, you are already getting into this, is it better than people remember? Because it doesn't have a great reputation. Like I said, it's one of those movies where I don't think its reputation has really changed much in the past 16 years.
The film's origin came from Judd Apatow's desire to make a stand-up comedian mentor film loosely based on his own early experiences as a struggling performer. After struggling to come up with a good idea for a story for years, he thought of making a film about a mentor facing a real-life crisis and decided to cast his former roommate Adam Sandler after seeing him in Reign Over Me. Ugh. They discussed making the film almost 2 years prior to the film entering production. In March of 2008, he cast Sandler, Seth Rogen, and Leslie Mann as the three leads. Eric Bana, Jonah Hill, and Jason Schwartzman were cast several months later. Apatow wanted Eric Bana for the role of Laura's husband simply because he liked his work. Rogen added that Bana was someone who could be considered an intimidating presence to both Sandler and Rogen. Apatow and Mann's daughters, Maud and Iris Apatow, played the young girls in the film. Both Apatow and Mann state that this casting choice allowed for more natural dialogue for the children, but the girls have not been allowed to actually see the film. Sandler, Rogen, and Hill wrote their own material for routines. Apatow filmed them performing the routines in front of live audiences using 6 cameras to capture their performances and audience reactions. Apatow filmed their entire performances, although only 5 to 10 minutes of stand-up footage appear in the film. Hill admitted his performance was not well received because he had never done stand-up before. Additionally, Apatow films scenes from Sandler's character's fictional filmography, as well as scenes from Schwartzman's character's fictional television show, Yo Teach, for the film to add realism. 2-time Academy Award-winning cinematographer Janusz Kaminski shot the film.
Trivia. Which 2 films did Kaminski win his Oscars for?
Schindler's List.
Schindler's List.
Yeah.
And
It's obvious. The
Titanic.
other one. Saving Private Ryan.
Okay. Was it really Schindler's List?
Yeah.
I threw that out there as a joke.
Really?
Yeah.
Man works with Spielberg.
Yeah, he works like exclusively with Spielberg.
That makes sense. Yeah, Schindler's
That was
List.
a hell of a guess.
It's also just my go-to, right? It's like that card trick where you just have someone pick a card and you randomly just pick one out. And you're like, it's this one. And they're like, no. And you're like, that'd be pretty cool if it was. So I just got the once and 2 times.
Listeners, note the date.
Sorry to pull away from that. That was a good read, Anton. That was a lot of information that I didn't know. And also, it made me... I almost forget about Jason Schwartzman somewhat in this film. One, because he's just very punchable in it. And his Yo Teach character is even more so. But I, after rewatching this, started watching a HBO series called Bored to Death. If anybody's seen that, Zach Galifianakis, 10 Dadson, and Jason Schwartzman. It's about a writer turned private detective as like a moonlight way to make money. And I couldn't even finish the first season because I just kept seeing him as Yo Teach / funny people character, watching it in such close proximity.
He kind of plays the same character in every movie. I like him in the films of Wes Anderson.
He's a fun character. He plays a lot of really fun characters in those films.
Yeah.
Rushmore.
Yeah.
Very good.
Darjeeling Limited, I really like him in there.
It's my favorite Wes Anderson movie.
He's in
Yes.
Underrated Wes Anderson movie.
He's in Scott Pilgrim.
Is he in
A
Scott
lot of stuff.
Yeah. I always get him confused with Dimitri Martin.
I see that.
Stand-up comedian. At first glance, and like, oh, that's him. They're very interchangeable. It's funny you mentioned there's a total of 5 minutes of stand-up in that movie. I wish it focused more on stand-up. Like, I think that's a great subject matter, right, to actually see, or at least for me, it's something that's very interesting, comedy in general, but also just like the struggles and development of stand-up comedians, their process, how much of just daily life inspires it. And for that to have not been focused on more, as well as like the end piece of it, right? What gets presented to a crowd and what actually their routine is, I feel like was one of the biggest missed opportunities, or things that I, on a rewatch, wish it had more of, that it followed more closely of the development of stand-up comedians, that community, and just the path that each of them go through. Except for,
sounds like you're talking about why wasn't it better?
exactly, that is. Yeah, might have jumped ahead here on the format.
Slightly, but I like what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because I
The
had
one,
similar thoughts about that in the rewatch.
yeah,
Like, I just needed a little bit more stand-up comedy. Maybe a little less celebrity cameos, because it hasn't aged well in
yeah, well,
2025.
yeah, his whole coming out to his friends and telling them about his disease and actually taking the advice of Ira and not just piling all on him and sharing it, and getting off his chest. Like, that was a huge. That was a. I don't know what the runtime for it was, but I think it's what added
Well,
where.
let's talk about the runtime, because that's the biggest problem with this movie. That's the first reason I have.
Yeah.
It's 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
I think it's not even just the fact that it's 2.5 hours, but the pacing of where the climax occurs and then you still have the rest of the film is just so imbalanced.
Yeah.
The climax occurs around, what, the 90-minute mark?
Yeah. And it basically you find out, oh, like it's in remission.
Right. And then you're like, wait, there's an hour left?
And that whole adventure to Marin was way too much.
What would
Yeah.
you say the film's 30 to 40 minutes too long?
Yeah. If I feel like the beginning of the film's the best part.
Yeah.
All of the character building, world setting.
I
Yeah,
feel
I'd
like
say the first hour is pretty strong.
Yeah. But then
Yeah.
it just meanders.
I think you could have hacked it at 90 minutes. Like, not tell the story up to 90 minutes as it exists and cuts off, but I think you could have taken all the best elements, all the points that we care about, and like actually had any sort of character development, or where we started to feel hate, love, whatever for any character, and condense those in such an easier way, because there is way too much filler in there. Like, the trip to Marin, absolutely unnecessary. Also just fucking weird. Like,
It was a weird point to try to make. Now, if the point of the story is really diving into this concept of, did Adam Sandler's character really learn his lesson? I don't need another hour to figure that out. Like, that's just really unnecessary, especially just from a storytelling standpoint, and like just how the beats of the film work out. It just feels like we're retreading versus actually letting that character development kind of feel a bit more natural.
yeah. I will say the one good thing that came out of that portion of the film was absolutely Australian husband. Dude's hilarious. Like, and it was amid everything going on between Seth Rogen, Adam Sandler, Leslie Mann. Like, he is the comic relief that comes in, which is very surprising given you have Adam Sandler and Seth Rogen and his just not intending to, but just happy-go-lucky, oblivious, hot dumb guy, Australian dad. Like, just as funny in his mannerisms. And
yeah, not too long ago from that, he was Nero in Star Trek, and so I remember.
Same year.
Yep. So I remember it was a bit jarring to see that performance, and then seeing him then in this very warm appearance in Funny People. Pretty hilarious.
The other problem with the last hour of the film is there's no tension. Comedies don't need tension, but dramas do. And this film is trying to be a drama for good chunks of the movie. But then after you learn that his disease is in remission, that tension gets taken out of it. And then when they end up visiting Leslie Mann's character's house with her family, you're like, where's the tension here? Like, okay, her husband finds out that she cheated on him, and how does that solve George's or Ira's problems, since they're the main characters? I was bored by a lot of it.
yeah, again, I think that whole thing could be cut. There was a lot of that, though, right? Where I don't know if it was a desire to have a long run time, or if it was they really felt there were value in some of those things that just really didn't translate, right? Like, even the scene where he's getting out and doing, George Simmons is getting out and doing stand-up again, and he does his Funny People song, right, where he's playing piano, and it drags on forever, and it ties all through. Like, this, it's the, culmination, stitching together of like acceptance and getting out there and blah blah blah. But it just, if I want to hear an Adam Sandler song, I actually want to hear a funny one, not just a self-proclaiming, I am this great, what are you going to do? And not in a good tune or even something that keeps my interest, but just makes me wish it was over so we could get back to the parts of the movie I don't like, or I do like. And that's what I felt happened in a lot of those. It's like, I'm just waiting for this portion to end to get back to areas of the movie that I do like. And that's what I mean by, I think it really could be 90 minutes if you cut out all of that crap and stitch together just a better story with a better resolution.
A lot of melodrama.
Yeah.
What's Leslie Mann's character's name?
I don't know. It's the same Leslie Mann character in
Right.
every Judd Apatow film.
You know when he first reaches out to her on the phone?
Yes.
Midway through the movie, I think. Okay, you know how she's not that surprised to hear from him? Were they in touch the whole time? Because when they reconnect, she's, you know what I mean? She's not that surprised. And I felt that like the film missed an opportunity there. That could have been a great dramatic moment where she's like, I haven't heard from you. Like, what happened? But she just doesn't seem surprised to hear from him.
I could see the tone of that is just almost a relationship that doesn't skip a beat. And that adds to the hope of George Simmons' character of this is a love that needs to be rekindled.
Yeah, I do think they set that tone well, right? Like, both of those people recognize that there is, on some level, still something there, was never fully reconciled, and they haven't made peace with it, so maybe there's still some hope, and that's why. I mean, she even goes against better judgment to go see him. He even calls her against better judgment of, like, should I do this, where he struggles with it. I do love the use of house phones. Like, that was one thing I was just like, holy shit. Like, they are on
2009 was the last year that had to be.
But even then, like, I mean, I guess a lot of movies really don't use a lot of over-the-phone communication in that era especially, but, like, it seemed such a weird thing. Like, I didn't expect to see it, because you also see some semblances of a cell phone, right? Like, Seth Rogen is, like, down typing on his T9.
Right.
But
right.
Also, I think George Simmons, though, was just antiquated. Like, he couldn't figure out technology in a lot of areas, so it kind of also made sense that he was using a house phone all the time.
True.
Struggling with remotes and having meltdowns.
It's 150 minutes.
It's 2 minutes.
Most comedies should be, 90 minutes? This isn't a traditional comedy, but I think Apatow has a problem with his other films, too. I love 40-Year-Old Virgin and Knocked Up, but they're both pretty lengthy movies as well. I think they're both over 2 hours. Brian, you were like, I think you asked earlier, like, why would it be this long? I think Anton may have mentioned it with the hubris. He's just like, I can make a 2.5 hour dramedy.
Yeah, and that is exactly how, to me, this film felt like. It's Judd Apatow and Adam Sandler doing the Dylan, you son of a bitch hand clasp, saying, we're going to make a dramedy and people are going to love it.
Yeah.
But they didn't love it.
That's the only I don't know if it's because I want to apply that logic and believe that both Judd Apatow, Adam Sandler, Seth Rogen, everybody involved in this are insanely talented, and this is not a reflection of that talent. And then it comes down to that hubris, right? Like, we can do this, and this is what we want to do, and we have something to prove, and it just fell on its face. But I wouldn't say fell on its face, because it wasn't absolutely horrible. It just was not great.
No, it's not a failure.
Yeah,
no, certainly not.
I mean, at the time, I think that, or even just like looking at both careers, research looking back shows there's a criticism on Judd Apatow's part of, can he actually make anything other than these raunchy comedies that really are, right now, people looking back don't look at them as fondly, funny enough. And the same thing for Adam Sandler. There was still a lot of question around at that point in his career. Does he have like dramatic chops? He's really only done it a couple times in his career. There totally is reasoning for a tag team there, and part of the Oscar bait is to make a longer film.
The funny thing about it too is, if part of the goal was to make something that was serious, that a drama which actually inspires emotion or some sort of connection, or the other end of the spectrum of feeling, right, that is not just joy but also some resentment, some anger, some heartache. I feel like his earlier comedies do that. Like, maybe not on a deep level, maybe not to an extreme of like true drama, but Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Knocked Up, 40-Year-Old Virgin, like, all of those movies I still hold and think are great comedies. But part of why they're great comedies is because you develop a caring connection, because they are genuine characters played by skilled actors, and they are on some level likable, but more importantly, very human, right? Like, we can identify traits of ourselves in them. We can identify people that we know, Steve Carell being that weird old guy that just stuff never worked out for. Like, you start to care about them, and you start to elicit a connection to a character as you would in a drama and not just a comedy, right? Prior to, and I think you mentioned this earlier, a lot of comedies were a very different shape and form. This spun off an entire new genre of comedy that was both raunchy, but also I felt was everyday man or just more relatable and like you identified and could connect with. And you ended up caring about these characters in a different level. It's part of the reason why I think like Seth Rogen has such a meteoric rise and is such a lovable person, is like you can't hate him. Like he's just kind of an average guy. He plays that and he finds himself in not always the most glamorous situations, but just very real ones that you connect with. So the funny thing about them setting out to make a drama, to make something of a masterpiece, is like, you've already done it. You've just done it on such a good level that it resonated with us as the viewers. That's why we loved you. And we were hoping this would be that on another scale. And I actually probably could like it if it was as long as it was, if he kept in that same format and didn't have all the filler or almost just trying too hard. Like he got away from what made his movies good.
I couldn't have said it any better. It's like he was getting away from the stuff he was best at.
Yeah. He was trying to have heart in a movie when he already did that.
We can talk about the tone then, because kind of what this is the other problem with it. Does it feel like two separate movies to you?
1000%. Yep. Sometimes 3.
I'd say the first 45 minutes to an hour, it's a comedy, right? The last 90 minutes is a soft drama, but I would argue it doesn't really commit to it.
Once you realize that, or once it reveals that his cancer is in remission, it feels like the stakes really leave. So then the drama that's built in feels a bit forced.
Because at that point, I stopped sympathizing with Simmons, where you start to question some of his decision making. Like, why is he doing this now? Like, it
just feels sleazy, right? It's hard to root for this guy.
Her too.
Yeah.
She cheats on her husband with Simmons with her kids in the house.
Really weird behavior.
That to me is not just the kids in the house, but like incorporating the kids into her infidelity of like, this is a person that's staying with us and it's my friend. And like, he's creating a relationship with children and she's showing him like videos, which the cat's performance and he doesn't get his lapdance lost on her, which is a truly sad moment. That actually was something that I liked in being able to show kind of his flaw of character. But
it's really uncomfortable.
It's so wrong. Like, and it's not even enjoyable to watch or adds, to your point, like any suspense or an element of like contention. It just makes you feel dirty, and they do.
Because up until that point, I think Apatow was trying to get you to root for them as a couple. And then when that happens, you're just like, am I now supposed to root for Eric Bana? Because he sucks. His acting's good, but I mean, his character, you're supposed to not like his character.
Yeah.
So who am I supposed to be supporting here? Seth Rogen?
And the way that it's executed communication-wise, it's a huge joke. Like, why have that very serious scene, but then throw in, he got a happy ending at a massage parlor.
Yeah.
Like, sure, that fits in like a typical comedy, but if you're trying to sell the scene seriously, having that thrown in, it just really throws the tone off.
If, let's say that whole part was removed, right? Let's say that George Simmons, listen, man, never rekindle anything. With him actually going up there, like, does it even really change the movie, right? Let's just say they stop because he's still in remission. He still has to go back and figure out how to live his life, whether it's in the world of stand-up comedy and like, become a better person. Like, did that experience even help drive him to be a better person? I don't think so. Like,
and I can see that's why that last 90 minutes got added, or that last portion got added back in or added into the film, because I think writing wise, they realized nothing is really a catalyst to show us whether George learned his lesson or not. But that's, to my point earlier, that's just poor writing. If there's nothing to kind of weave in a natural catalyst to show with his relationship with Seth Rogen or with Ira that he's a jerk and didn't learn his lesson. You don't need another, full hour basically to tell that.
Yeah. I think that whole thing, especially on rewatch, I'm just like, we could have cut this and it would have been a better movie because of less runtime, but it also would have been a better movie because you end at the same reconciliation in the first scene, regardless if that happened or not.
We can kind of talk about the elephant in the room here. It's called Funny People. It's written and directed by a comedy director. It stars a bunch of comedians. Why wasn't it funnier?
I think there were parts. There wasn't a single part in it that I really died laughing, right? Like,
I love the end part.
That was pretty solid. That
with
was
Ray
the
Romano. That's so funny.
and Seth Rogen. He's talking to me. He's like, who?
It's fine. It's okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
Pat, you're telling me you didn't laugh at it?
It's, I would say, probably not one of the 25 funniest things in an Apatow movie.
No, but I mean,
So-
look, within the vortex of just this film, it was pretty funny.
I think
It's
it was.
fine.
I'll
Here's
agree.
why I don't love it. If you take that scene out of the film, the film doesn't change in any way whatsoever.
I mean, but also if you take Aubrey Plaza, well, hey, probably
I'm just gonna argue to that, Pat. I think context of the film and the style of comedy will dictate whether that rule still fits. That's not going to fit in like a Monty Python absurdist humor style.
No, but it's a celebrity cameo that it never pops up in the film again. It has nothing to do with the plot. It's fine. Like, I laughed at it, sure, but the best jokes in all of Apatow's films are all pretty much related to the plot and the characters. It was a funny Eminem cameo. Ray Romano.
Yeah, I mean, think about 40-Year-Old Virgin, him getting his chest waxed and yelling "nipple fuck." You know, if that was cut, it wouldn't have changed the movie. But I love it. Like, and
I think it would have.
Or I mean, I really ran
things from that movie.
Or I really randomly like the scene of Jonah Hill holding up the fish, those platform shoes with the fish in them at the eBay store, saying, "Can I buy these?"
Yeah, I mean, trying to figure out why can't I have the money?
You don't need it in the film.
No, but no one knew who he was at the time.
Yeah.
Look, I think my biggest gripe with the movie and what led to this point was there wasn't really anything that made me really laugh. Like, I went into a Judd Apatow movie coming off the hills of great movies that made me laugh and die laughing, and there was never a moment of that. Anton, I'm glad you reminded me of it, because that actually, I think, was like one of the glimpses of an Apatow movie. Like, it was funny. It may have not been entirely necessary, but just Eminem, one, not knowing who Ray Romano is, yelling at him across the public place, awkward Ira trying to, like, what do we do here? And both of them being awkward. Like, it was one of the funnier parts of the movie, in a movie that did not have a lot of funny parts or moved away from trying to be funny.
Yeah, and I think that to that point, that inconsistency in the film, lacking what people expect out of an Apatow film in terms of the comedy, really did not sell itself well. Especially when we think of who was the main audience, or I think that actually is a kind of quick question. Who is the audience for this film? Because it's definitely not the same like high schoolers and college kids that love those same previous films. Because they definitely are going into something like this in 2009 and saying, whoa, this is definitely different from what I expect. I expected some McLovin. Did not get that.
And it wasn't like we needed that to be the whole movie. And this is where I think we can get into something we were talking about before we started recording. Defenders of this film will tell you that, well, you just don't understand it because Apatow didn't intend for it to be a comedy. It's not supposed to be a comedy. It's supposed to be a drama with some comedy in it. And it's like, well, they didn't market it that way. Expectations matter. Look who directed it. Look who's in it. It's called Funny People. It's about comedians. I don't think it's unfair to expect it to be funny.
No,
I think that it is more of a comedy than it is a drama. And I don't say that because I think it's hilarious. I just think it does a poor job of being a drama. Like, for all the reasons that we've listed out, is like, I really don't get super invested in these people. I don't feel the drama of it. Like, there is drama, but it's also lost on you as really caring, because you're like, he's kind of an asshole. He's doing it to himself. Like, I'm not super invested in the outcome of him. Really, I'm more invested in Ira. If anything, that's maybe where some drama is, of like, you're concerned for him and care about his, career, relationships, all that. But I don't even see it as a drama. I just see it as a movie that has no idea what it wants to be, has no idea how to communicate it to an audience, and doubles down on the wrong things where Judd Apatow's talents don't lie. And the people that try and stand it up as like it is a drama or do defend it, I think is exactly what Apatow was thinking when he took this chance of like, I don't have to put the best thing out there. I have a fan base of people that love me and my films, similar to like how people love Wes Anderson films. And even the shitty ones, they will die by as being good because it's simply a Wes Anderson film. I honestly think that he and Adam Sandler were banking on that. Like, we don't have to knock it out of the park. enough people that love us will love this regardless. They'll be blinded to logic because it's us. And it's a good and a bad thing. I don't feel like that many people did. Like, I love Judd Apatow, love his movies, love Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
But I can honestly say, like, you missed the mark so badly that I can't even, die on a hill with you.
Would have been a more effective drama if George had died.
Yeah. There'd be a lesson learned.
Yes, at the point that he went to go see Leslie Mann. If he just deteriorated and dropped dead right there, and then it was just a comedy, it was a movie about how Ira deals with death through comedy, and that inspires some of the development, and he starts seeing things in a different perspective, and this follows a track of like his career growth and relationships and Jason Schwartz's downfall and Jonah Hill's, like they could have done so many better ways. Like,
yeah, this is a very intentional film from Apatow and Sandler to get their Oscars. There's no other way for me to see it. That's how I felt back in 2009. It's how I feel today, that they were still trying to chase those demons of, we're going to challenge what critics' expectations are of us. Roger Ebert gave this film a good score. Like, not like a 3.4, 3.5 out of 4 or something like that. And it still touches on that same question around, can Sandler use his dramatic chops in a way, and he gave him credit for that. But I think that if that's the only thing that Sandler's focused on, then the lack of maturity then is on him and on Apatow. Instead of making a good movie, they just tried to make an Oscar film. And trying to use that formula did not create a good tone or execution for this film.
And I respect the effort. I will mention what I like about this film. I really like Sandler's performance. I think he gives a really good acting performance. He is obviously brilliant at delivering comedy, and we've seen him do other dramatic roles, some of them more successful than others. His acting is not one of my issues with this film. Seth Rogen, too. I think they're both good in this film. On the other hand, 2009, if Sandler wasn't in this film, he would have been the Bear Jew in Inglourious Basterds.
That's pretty cool.
I would have much rather seen him in a Tarantino film
than Eli Roth.
Yeah, that hack. Yeah. No thanks.
I agree with you, Pat. And we've talked a lot about the things we don't like, and we've covered in some of the things we do. I would love to talk about more of the things we like, because I'm also interested in what you guys, took away from it as being like, I did like this portion of it. Because again, not all bad. And Adam Sandler's range as far as an actor, like, yes, he can nail a comedic, but like I mentioned earlier, that when he's frustrated with the remotes, because he's also frustrated with his disease and the reaction to medication, like, actually felt for him. Like, in that moment was like, oh shit, Adam Sandler's not making me laugh, but like, fuck, like, I could see how frustrating that is. I could imagine that. And like, now I actually care about you. And that is where we should have gone with. If Apatow wanted it to be a drama, Sandler wanted it to be a drama, more instances of that and less of how's his love life going to shake out, and like playing that character of funny, but also just a shitty person. Like, those are the things that we want to see. Those are the things we want to connect with. Because again, it comes back to relatability and actually seeing a genuine character versus just like, I could never relate to the situation of going to a woman's house, or let alone like my wife having a man in my house with my kids. Like, that is
your kids in the other room. It just felt so wrong.
Just so weird.
Well, and the funny thing is like, even when the husband finds out, like, his frustration and issues, it does not come down to that. It does not come down to the betrayal of like our home, our family, like my kids' exposure to this. It comes down to just like, oh, you're having sex with him, I'm gonna punch him. Like, it's very surface level. It's not anything that we connect with, because as we watch it, we're like, I would fucking kill somebody if that was it. Like, I wouldn't punch them because my wife is there, or because they're slept with my wife. I would literally like, probably like, both be very upset at my wife, never be able to talk to her again, because that's an ultimate betrayal, like worse than the infidelity part of it. But it just moved away from so much of that.
It's pure melodrama.
Yeah, long story short, I absolutely agree with you on the actor's performance, but just the situations that they were put into drove no real excitement, added to the runtime, and was unnecessary. And as far as the Bear Jew, dude, yeah, I would 100 times trade this movie for 10 minutes of Sandler coming out of a cave and beating Nazi skull with a baseball bat. Like,
yeah,
I also think that would have been an interesting dynamic, Aldo Raines or Brad Pitt, and like how Adam Sandler played that character. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
too.
I
I think it
want
would
that. I want that alternate universe where that happens.
Well, and I think it would add like a buddy element. Like you would associate those two as like buddy, like a buddy movie.
Imagine the
I-
Gorlami scene with Sandler in it. And it's, don't get me wrong, brilliant scene. I'm not taking anything away from that scene. But just imagine Sandler in that scene, interacting with Christoph Waltz.
He just says it like a New Yorker. Golami.
Gorlami. Anton, where do you stand on this? About Sandler doing this? Because, like, for me, I know he can do serious roles.
Yeah, I really love Adam Sandler. I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s. Of course I love Adam Sandler. I think that, yeah, sure, he's got great acting chops and he did a good job here. But I'm not going to pretend like this is the kind of performance that I love from Adam Sandler or the kind of performance I want to see. It's a very melodramatic kind of drama that I feel like has been tread on so many times in Hollywood and so many films, and I'm just bored by it. The whole story about trying to rekindle a lost love and then it results in like a love triangle of infidelity. Like, how many films have already treaded around that? And I feel like films have evolved over time. That drama doesn't have to be around those same traditional roles. And the proof for me, at least, is Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems and that dramatic performance. Totally not a character that I think a lot of people can relate to. Maybe to some. That's a very scary life. But
bad if you do.
Yeah, but that is the kind of drama and performance art that I feel like is just so much better suited for his skills that I don't have to relate to him to really enjoy that performance and know that he has acting chops. I much prefer him in something like that.
And Uncut Gems is still kind of a comedic performance.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's like using the strengths and skills and maturity that I felt like maybe he needed more time to realize and accept in the roles that he's taking.
I am curious, you talking about loving Adam Sandler early, right? As in just seeing him progress through his career and it obviously being part of why we were drawn to this movie in the first place and excited about it. I feel that excitement in rewatch was continued and like upon rewatch was like, oh, this is why I felt so let down, is because one, what you pointed out, right? The first portion of the movie is actually pretty good. Like, it's not stellar, it's not great, but it's good. It keeps you into it and you're excited and you think it's going to build. But even more than that, the first couple minutes, when they're running Adam Sandler's prank phone calls, when you're getting reminded of all the reasons like you fell in, like why you loved Adam Sandler, especially in his early raw age, and also his just naive, inexperienced, like when he sees, I don't remember who it is, he sees somebody on the street in New York, and he's like, oh, that's him, like wowed by a star or comedic acting. Like you get pulled into, this is a movie about somebody that I have loved forever, and I get to see them alongside other characters that I've now come to love in the comedy space, and from a director, Judd Apatow, that I love because of all these other, like, it started off from the trailer to the first couple minutes and introing so strong and giving you so much hope, and it fell flat on its face. And that is probably my, like, for all of the reasons that it went wrong, for how long it is, like, that is the hardest blow of it all, is, damn, y'all let me, like, down. This had such high hopes. You started strong. I could have really loved this had you gone a different one.
I liked all the random NBA gear he wears throughout the film.
Yeah.
I think it's just his regular wardrobe, too.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Like, he played himself in a lot of respects.
Did you gain respect for Eric Bana after this?
I've always had a strong respect for Eric Bana, but I also really like, I'm not going to say Hulk.
Please don't. This almost makes up for what he did in Hulk.
I am genuinely curious, though, and I think we've hit a few of them, but really, like, what were the good points? Because, again, I think there were parts that I did find myself being like, I kind of do like this. And then I'm like, it's kind of running too long.
I like Seth Rogen's character development.
Yes.
I think that his felt the most natural.
He had an arc.
Yeah.
I like his relationship with Jonah Hill and Jason Schwartzman. And Aubrey Plaza, I guess. Like, I like their stuff together.
I think that's a totally separate movie that could have been its own movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a complete story about, like, their journey to becoming stand-up comedians.
I would have much preferred to see that film. And then Adam Sandler's film could be a totally separate film.
Yeah, that's straight to DVD. In terms of Adam Sandler movies, would you rather watch Funny People or any of the movies Adam Sandler has produced straight to Netflix in the last 5 years.
I would totally watch Hubie's Halloween more than this film.
I'm so glad you said Hubie's Halloween, because it's not a great movie, but I have watched it. Like, my daughter likes Adam Sandler and will watch some of those because some of them are appropriate, and then some of them are actually pretty funny. The Wrong Missy is a good one. It's not Adam Sandler's on it, it's his movie. But yeah, I was thinking about that, and I was like, I should love funny people so much more than any of these dumb Adam Sandler movies that ultimately were made, yes, for some entertainment, but also so they could go to an awesome location and just film and get paid and make some money, but, kind of stand up something.
Adam Sandler is so smart with a Netflix deal. Like, he signed a long-term picture deal with Netflix, exclusive rights to Netflix, before like direct to streaming, or like streaming was really kind of the primary option.
Yeah.
And he killed it.
He got the bag.
He got the bag.
To answer your question, Brian, that's a really tough question. What would I rather watch? I think Funny People is technically a better movie than all that stuff, but I might rather watch them. This is quite boring to me.
Is it a better movie if it's a harder movie to watch? Just because you spend more money?
It could be, because some of the best movies ever made I don't think are easy watches.
Yeah, but I think it's all depends on what's not easy to watch about them, right? If it's just not easy to watch because it's boring, I'm good. I need entertainment, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I might take back what I said. Do I think less of this movie than I thought now?
I mean, I've always felt a bit more disappointed because you call yourself, the film calls itself Funny People, but it just really isn't that.
It's supposed to be a comedy, according to some people.
But it's really just not that funny.
Brian, you nailed it earlier. The drama doesn't land either.
Well, it's two movies. And I think you think less of the second movie that we're talking about, which is all the unnecessary stuff. It's all the portion or the break off that we don't want to see. But on a whole, like, you do that roller coaster, or at least that's what I found in my experience. Again, I liked it more than I remembered liking it, watching it in theaters. I liked it more on rewatch. I still didn't love it, but there were parts of it that kept me like, I kind of like this, right? Like, but when you focus on just the parts that we don't like, or that second part of the movie that we parse out as being a separate movie, like, nobody likes any of that.
No, and another reason why I think the two things clash, some scenes feel very scripted, and other scenes feel like the classic Apatow improv. They don't gel well together for me.
Like, he had a very specific vision rather than just a broad and letting people go do their thing and be who they are and who we cast them for.
Another question, because we were talking about Janusz Kaminski earlier. What was the point of hiring him? Like, did he just want to work because he was in between Spielberg projects?
No, it was to get a Academy Award. That's pretty clear. Like, shoot the movie well. We're gonna make it really dramatic.
Was it shot well?
Nope.
Nothing particularly impressive about it.
But it is shot like a drama.
It is. It's
very distinctly different from, like, Knocked Up.
Didn't make it better.
Nope. And again, I think lack of maturity from Apatow and Sandler.
I did like the ending, though, where they're sitting down, where he's working back at the deli, and he's sitting down, and that reconcile takes place through him helping him with comedy.
Yeah, he has a nice arc. Ira.
Yeah.
He does.
Yeah.
I think that's where the whole storyline around being a comedian and how do you evolve along with your jokes, I think was a really good, well-written portion. Like, even Sandler says, all right, you're not getting girls writing jokes like that. Yeah. And I feel like it just was just kind of a reflection of him and his relationships. And then as that continued to evolve, it just really goes really full circle as he improves. And then we get that closing scene. I think that's really well written. But there's too much kind of fluff thrown in that loses focus on how to properly develop, like, the true characters.
I do, again, I think the first portion of the movie is obviously the best, but the just how him and George come together in the first place is great. Like, George getting up, doing just the worst stand-up routine that leaves everybody uncomfortable. Ira responding to it the only way he knows how, of like, man, if he's sad, I might as well just kill myself. Like, I'll take your money. Like, just playing into that, and then him going out and seeing him in the car in the hall. You're gonna die. I wish there was more of that. I wish that continued to develop and was the entire path of the movie in that relationship, and more instances of that. But yeah,
I think the funniest line is unfortunately in the trailer, which is, people don't pass through fire to get to heaven. I think your grandfather went to hell.
I think he went to hell. Yeah.
This is a trailer movie. Just watch the trailer and you've watched the best bits.
It also is a TikTok movie, which I don't know if you have the TikToks, but one thing, just seeing clips of it, like digesting it in pieces, even after rewatching it and it coming up in like For You page or even just searching some of it, like, in clip form, it actually has a lot of great parts. It has all the makings for being a great movie. The same reason we got fooled in by the trailer, and it is a trailer movie. But it's just funny because that's like today's version of what used to be a trailer movie is now like the short form video of social media. And I've been pulled into that many a times. I found like, a clip of a movie that, oh, this actually looks good. And then I watched it and it was terrible. Which, if anyone's seen that Jason Bateman terrorist airplane movie, that's one of them.
My wife was watching it recently and it did not hold my interest.
No, it is the worst.
I was going to say, I just want Jason Bateman on Arrested Development. I'm good.
Yeah. Or Ozarks.
I'm glad you brought up Ozark, Brian, because there's an example of someone who was traditionally from the world of comedy and surprised everyone by showing us his dramatic chops.
Yeah.
I still imagined he was still Michael Bluth the whole first season, and it made it more hilarious.
Oh, I did too.
Yeah.
But I still took him seriously. You're like, wow, he's pulling this off.
Yeah. Which is even more of a testament of his acting chops, because it is hard to predict. Like, that is what, for the longest time, I only knew Jason Bateman as. And then even after, I think really like what Horrible Bosses. Trying to think anything else I've seen.
Yeah, he's good call out. I think that it will always be a challenge for any actor to break what they've been typecast in.
Yeah, unless you're Arnold and you just lean into it, be a part of that joke.
Pretty naturally funny guy though.
Yeah.
Great timing.
My name is Harry Tasker. I'm a computer salesman for Cyberdyne Industries. Here's my card.
I rewatched Jingle All the Way this Christmas.
Oh, we covered that recently.
You did.
Months ago, but whatever. Yeah.
Kind of wish I was on that episode.
Howard Langston. My number one customer.
Dude,
Put the cookie down.
Sinbad with the bomb. Like, that just cracked me up.
Now, Howard, you can't bench press your way out of this one. I've got just the tool you need. Okay, here's my last thought about this before we can talk about Judd Apatow. We may have wanted more stand-up comedy, but I was thinking about this. General audiences, I don't think they care about the careers of comedians, the lives of comedians. I don't think most people care what it's like to be getting your start in show business. I don't really find that compelling in a movie for the very similar reason I don't really like movies about people making movies. Just my personal preference.
I'll pose a counter to that, right? I think if done well, it doesn't matter if it's stand-up comedy or a windmill maker. I don't know. Are there windmill makers out there? Like, as long as you're showing like passion is infectious, right? And when you are able to portray, and I think a lot of people connected to the first part of the movie and would say that they like that portion because you're connecting to the person, right? Like, you're excited by what they're excited because you see a genuine interest in it. And if they followed in that vein, regardless of if you have an interest in stand-up comedy or you find it as interesting subject matter, it can be made interesting. That's the magic of acting, film, all of it, is you can take something that you never even knew you had an interest in, or you truly don't, but you're invested in the person, right? You care about what they care about because you care about them. And again, I think that's where Judd Apatow's strengths lie in his previous movies. Like, you created connections to his characters that were also funny, but real and genuine. And, regardless of what they were experiencing or what the subject matter was, you found yourself interested, if not interested in it before. So I'll say a counter to, I think if it had been a movie about stand-up comedy or comedian's journey, people would have gravitated to it simply for the love of the character and the character development that takes place.
If it was good.
Yeah. If that's the
It's a style of writing or a style of filmmaking that feels like I'm going to pat myself on the back. And I don't disagree with you, Brian. If people can do it well, then all the more power to them. I will watch it if it's good. I just think that too often it's just not executed well.
There's a movie I haven't seen yet that I've been hesitant to, and I will see it eventually. It's Spielberg's latest movie, The Fabelmans, which is essentially an autobiographical story of him,
his life
as a young man and how he got into movie making. I'm worried it'll be too self-indulgent for me, but I've heard enough good things about it that eventually I am going to watch it. And because he's my favorite filmmaker, I feel I'm going to be obligated to watch it at some point. But I stayed away from it so far just because of that. Maybe it's just a personal preference thing. It's a tough sell for me. But in this movie, I think, yeah, to your point, Anton, it's a little self-indulgent maybe.
Yeah, and it was at a point in Adam Sandler's career that I feel like it's either it is tugging on those heartstrings of his existing fans to buy in and to help push for him in a dramatic role to, again, convince the Academy that this is an award-winning performance. But I just feel like that self-indulgence, that I'm gonna pat myself on the back for my career, and that execution is just not entertaining for me. Especially like that same dissection of any like profession or the art of filmmaking or the art of stand-up comedy. It's just hasn't been well executed. Like, what is it? There was a film that came out in I want to say it was 2023. It was Babylon. Do you guys remember that?
I didn't see it, but I know of it.
Yeah.
Total
Yeah.
bomb. I don't know if it's good or not.
Total bomb. And the whole concept of the film is it's basically like, how was Hollywood made? How is Hollywood that we know today? That was not how it was marketed. And I saw the film and I thought to myself, this is one of those self-indulgent films of, I love the art of cinema. And I feel like that is just a really tough sell for a lot of people.
How the sausage gets made.
I was just going to say, I don't know if you've seen the TV show Crashing. I don't know why I thought Judd Apatow was involved in that. But when I think about this movie, it's what I love. It's what I wanted it to be. Crashing is the series version of what I wanted Funny People to be. It's the Pete Holmes series about his stand-up comedy development. It's I highly recommend it.
Who's in it?
So it's Pete Holmes, stand-up comedian Pete Holmes. It has a ton of, every couple episodes it rotates out other comedic figures, like Sarah Silverman's in it, TJ Miller, Artie Lang. Just
I was gonna say a bunch of winners there.
I was gonna say, as soon as you said TJ Miller, I'm like, he hasn't been in Hollywood for years.
27,
right?
So it was 2017 to 2019.
Okay,
and it is.
That makes sense.
Yeah, Judd Apatow's an executive producer on it.
Okay, interesting. Let's talk about Judd Apatow.
Let's do it.
I'm gonna rattle off some, not stats, but this was his work in the 2000s. Beginning in 2005, he writes and directs The 40-Year-Old Virgin and Knocked Up.
Mm-hmm.
Then he writes/co-writes Fun with Dick and Jane, Walk Hard, The Dewey Cox Story, You Don't Mess with the Zohan, and Pineapple Express. He produces Anchorman, Talladega Nights, Superbad, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Step Brothers, and Year One. He does all of that in a 6-year span. His fingerprints are all over the most iconic comedy of the decade. That is as impressive as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
Funny People is where it flips. And my question to you is going to be, what happens to him in the 2010s? Because this is what happens after 2010. He writes and directs This Is 40. Trainwreck. Okay. Mm-hmm. The King of Staten Island. Not bad. The Bubble. Never saw it. He produces Get Him to the Greek. That's funny, but Diddy's a major character in it, so I don't know if it's funny anymore. Bridesmaids. That's the biggest hit of
I really like Bridesmaids.
Wanderlust. I don't know it. The 5-Year Engagement. Not a fan. Begin Again. Anchorman 2. Ugh. Pee-wee's Big Holiday, Pop Star, The Big Sick, Juliet Naked, Bros, and then Please Don't Destroy the Treasure of Foggy Mountain. I would say no real hits since Bridesmaids.
That's so funny. Like, Please Don't Destroy. I saw that one on a plane.
Big fan.
It did not get it was not going to get a good chance to succeed, and it wasn't very good. But I think those guys are funny. They're like how do I say, Lonely Island Light?
Yeah. They're like a new generation of a couple funny comedians. Like, I didn't think it was that bad, but it's probably a movie I would watch on a plane if there was nothing else to watch.
But you see where I'm going with this, right? His 2000s run, nothing lasts forever. It was, how could he have stayed on top? How is he going to outdo that? You can't.
Do you feel he dealt on this type of movie with This Is 40?
Yes. And I
'Cause
mean, I know
Yeah.
some people really like that movie. I didn't care for it. Maybe I'll
Mm-mm.
feel differently when I turn 40 eventually, but
I
Maybe.
do think it was better than this. Like, I think it was an evolution of Funny People, right?
I'd
Like,
actually
it's
rather watch This Is 40 than this.
This
yeah,
is 40
same.
was definitely funnier.
Yeah, it was
And
a
that's
real
what I mean.
comedy.
I think he took some learnings from this and still tried to play in that space. And then to your point, Pat, like, he didn't recover aside from Crashing, or because I think what you just listed was movies. Crashing was 2017 to 2019. Like,
An
love,
executive producer is who knows how
yeah,
involved he was.
that's a good point. That's a good point. But Bridesmaids, absolute banger, hilarious. But other than that, like, he really didn't recover. Because none of those are really that great other than Bridesmaids.
I don't think it's a talent thing, though, because look what happened to comedies in general in the 2010s. There's just not as many legendary comedy movies anymore. I don't know why that is. I know other podcasts have like really delved into this. There's probably a lot of reasons you could point to. And of course, it is all subjective.
There are, like you said, Pat, a lot of other podcasts that have covered why aren't comedies pushed as hard as when we had our comedy heyday. And I highly recommend just going to those podcasts to listen in because comedians have very strong opinions on why there aren't more comedies nowadays. But I think part of it is just taste change, and also the bar for what is acceptable comedy has changed a lot. Like that style of comedy, as I said earlier, has really fallen out of favor. Like people can't make the same jokes in film that they would with like 40-Year-Old Virgin or with Superbad. Can't really just make the same kind of style of comedy. That was also the same era of like The Hangover, Observe and Report. That style of comedy is very, I hate to say it, but kind of dated. It's hilarious, but it doesn't fit in this era.
No, it's a good point.
I was surprised to hear, because I totally forgot about this, that he did the Dewey Cox story, Walk Hard.
He was one of the producers.
Mm-hmm.
Hilarious movie. Like, one of the funniest movies that I think is very underrated or just not enough people know about. And I find myself quoting all the time. The wrong kid died is primarily the one just out of nowhere.
I wonder how much these comedies shifted onto streaming series too. I'm sure that had to be part of it.
I feel like movies, and it's not just comedies, but I feel like, to your point, Pat, like streaming and just the series of things has really taken over, right? Where before movies were a very big medium or format, it's not there anymore, and it's more about the series, right? Like you think about Game of Dragons, Ozarks,
Game of Dragons.
Oh shit!
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, House of Dragons, Game of Dragons. You think about these series that are getting the attention and the draw more than you are movies, right? Like, I feel like just from my lifetime, now I hear less and less about movies and am more focused on these longer, drawn out series. And so, and in the comedy space, I think it's also the same problem there, because there's not even that many banger comedy series that have come out, right? Like, I still watch The Office and Parks and Rec, and It's Always Sunny. And What We Do in the Shadows is still there, and it's great. But I don't know. I think it's one both across both mediums, right? Like, comedy is a new, hard, undefined thing, or we haven't had that resurgence of a certain genre or type of comedy. And then two is like, I think movies are just on the downtrodden.
Are you almost saying there's a bit of an oversaturation of content?
I think there is.
I think that there's less movies coming out. Like, I think the focus is less on movies than it is on series.
Yeah, that's what I meant by the content thing.
Yeah.
It's just there's so much, there's so many different series on so many different platforms. I can't keep track of it all. I can't make head nor tail of it. I've given up on it. I host a movie podcast now, so a lot of my time is dedicated towards movies at this point. So that's
just
part of it.
Just focus on one streaming platform. Just watch Tubi. It's really good.
I don't have anything against Tubi. If there's one thing I want from Tubi, Anton, not the best quality streams, but that's why it's free.
Yeah, but you can get so many good hood films.
You do.
Oh my god, there's like over 100.
I only jumped on Tubi to watch Willy Wonka. That was the only time I literally had to download Tubi before it.
I don't think it was a great quality version. That you know what that was? Because we talked about it on that recording, Brian. I'm positive that copy of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was whatever version aired on TNT in 2008.
It's what they had. They were like,
You're like,
"Can we
"Well,
use this?" Sure.
That's what we got.
They had the option to like maybe spend $2 more to get a higher definition version. They were like, "Nah."
Have you ever watched a movie on a streaming service without commercials, but you can see they're using the copy that has the like fade to black for commercials, and they
Yeah.
still take it out?
Yeah, I love that. It's so fun.
The version of True Lies I watched on Tubi when we covered that a year ago, Anton had that, the fade to black.
Love you, Tubi.
All right, I'm going back to Tubi now that I know the True Lies.
It was. I mean, this is a year ago.
It's
I
probably
don't.
not.
Probably
Oh,
not now.
sorry, listeners will know that I'm always on my Tubi like soapbox. There's so much good movies on Tubi beyond just all the hood films.
They should probably sponsor us.
All right,
I'd love that.
Give me 3 recommendations for movies that are on Tubi.
There were already like the films that Pat listed. If you love Judd Apatow films, you're gonna love Tubi.
All of Puff Daddy's movies are probably on there now.
All of the Friday movies are on there.
Is he in one of those? Probably.
I don't know. I've watched all of them. I do not remember.
How many Friday movies are there? 4?
4. Friday, next Friday.
Friday after next.
And then what's the 4th one? Final Friday?
Final Friday.
Thank God it's Friday.
Friday after my next Friday.
3 Fridays from now.
I think we've officially run out of things to talk about for funny people.
Saving Private Friday.
All
Friday
dogs
and
go
Love. Okay. Well, anything to add before we wrap this up? Give our ratings. Brian's hesitating.
Jonah Hill isn't popular anymore.
Was it the weight loss?
Just stuff coming out about him in different media outlets.
Have you done any other Adam Sandler movies?
I don't think so. I think this was our first Sandler. This is our first Sandman.
It's our first Sandler movie.
I know that there are letdown Sandler movies out there, like 8 Crazy Nights, for example. I remember when that came out.
I really love that movie.
I like it. I don't love it.
I like it. I don't think it's a good movie. I enjoy it.
So
I thought it was going to be better.
For animation, it's like amazing how much they care and attention they put into an animated Sandler film.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap this up then.
All right.
Brian, since you're the guest, would you like to go first?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to decline.
Anton?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first.
Anybody?
Yeah.
I can, but I don't care.
Look, I want to keep it short and sweet because this film was way too long. It's not a great comedy. It's not a great drama. And it was just Oscar bait at the end of the day for me. I do think that Adam Sandler showed that he has strong dramatic chops, but it feels like that's just it's a dramatic exercise in that sense. I don't think it's anything that's at all Oscar worthy. I just stand by my statement that it's better to play into the strengths of what an actor can resonate with, and for him it's the ability to drive drama and tension through comedy, and he did that in, of course, Uncut Gems, and I'm sure he has one more really great performance in him, maybe a couple more. So who knows? Adam Sandler is an enigma, but all I know is this particular film was just not my cup of tea. It is very self-indulgent and just boring, and I feel like with so much star power to it, it's just disappointing that a film that of that high caliber, especially from a director that really hit it out of the park, defining a comedic era. It is just so sad that we can't really laugh at funny people. So for me, this film is just a man. It is a D+.
I'll make you go last, Brian.
I can go next if you want.
No, you're going to go last now.
All right.
Since you didn't want to go first. It's either first or last.
No, I'm just making it difficult on all the fronts.
I hadn't seen this since it came out. I wouldn't say it was a bad rewatch, apart from the fact that it is arguably an hour too long and paced quite clumsily. It has its funny moments. It has some good performances, especially from Sandler and Rogen. I wouldn't even say there's anything inherently bad about it, apart from the fact that I don't think it's a particularly effective comedy. I don't think it's a particularly effective drama. It's a fizzle. The talent that made this movie and started in this movie and filmed this movie. We had a 2-time Academy Award-winning cinematographer working on this film, and our boy Janusz. It's a fizzle. It should have been far better than what it is. This is textbook mediocrity, and I don't even think it's particularly mediocre. It doesn't have a lot of memorable moments. It tries too hard to be two different things. It has tonal shifts that I don't think it earns. This is not a funny movie, and it's called Funny People. And yeah, I am holding it against that. I am. I don't care what anyone says. If it's called Funny People, it should be pretty funny, and it's not. This is not some underrated, misremembered, misunderstood masterpiece. I think it's properly rated and properly remembered, which is to say it's not really well remembered. I'm on the fence of where to put it. I could go C minus. I could go D plus. Anton, I think I'll just side with you and go D plus and then just make it simple. I can't really recommend this because if someone were to ask me, oh, I've never seen an Apatow movie, what should I watch? I would probably list a dozen films before I got to this one. And I don't really think I'm going to ever revisit this anytime soon. So yeah, I'll go D plus.
I share a lot of alignment with things that you both have said. And I think, we've covered them a lot throughout this episode. The biggest thing for me is I'm not mad about it. I'm just disappointed. Like I said in the beginning, I felt really let down by what I was hoping this movie was going to be, what I feel I bought when I saw this movie. And on a rewatch, I feel better about it than I did initially watching it. If we talked about this before this episode. It's how I came to be on this episode. I was definitely a lot more hot about it. I previously probably would have rated it a D minus, right? Just slightly above an F. Thought it was an absolute crash and burn. Definitely feel better about it. Definitely found more parts of it that I enjoyed and more reasons to not like it in a different frame, right? The infidelity part hit differently than it did in 2009. The whole just drawn out portion of that. But I agree with, everything both of you have said. It's far too drawn out. It doesn't know what it wants to be. There's an absolute powerhouse cast that should have, while gave a good performance with what they were given, should have ultimately told a better story because it should have been a better story. And it doesn't know even what story it wants to be. I'm a little conflicted on where to land it. D plus, C minus, very much in that same range. And I think, for continuity, I could say D plus, but I do think it earns a little bit more than that just for the good things that it has and based off of the rewatch. So I'll go C minus. Definitely don't think I'll be watching it again. I'm glad that he got better with This Is 40. Learned a little bit, but sad to see that can't keep firing so hot for too long. And the late 2010s were not very nice to Judd Apatow, or he wasn't very nice to him.
No. In some ways, these are the toughest kinds of movies to rate for me because there's nothing in here I hate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, I don't have a lot of strong feelings about this film other than disappointment, like you said, Brian. It's such a lukewarm, I called it a fizzle. Well, that's it for Funny People. Brian, great to have you on again. That's twice in the same season.
Love having you on, Brian. Always.
Love being here. Thank you guys for the opportunity. Always happy to talk about movies that I actually have watched and know something about because there's not a lot of them.
Oh, don't sell yourself short. There's plenty of them. We got to get you to your third appearance because we've said this on other episodes with other guests. That's where you become a serious guest.
For a third appearance in a serious Hallmark, it's got to be a movie I'm very serious about.
Yeah.
I got to go through the catalog and see what you guys haven't done.
We'll find something.
Yeah. I got movies I'm hot about both ways, for and against, that are divisive.
Well, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a follow and a 5-star review. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel as well. We have various levels of subscription there that you can subscribe to. As always, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And for those who would like to support us directly, we have a Patreon. Links to all of the mentioned are in the description. Thanks for listening and see you next time.